Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. Thanks for being here with us on this Friday afternoon. We got a really good Friday afternoon show for you. Second hour, Dr. Matthew Bunson, who you know from all the EWTN news outlets and Al Cresta, and you hear Dr. Matthew Bunson all the time, and he's over in Rome. We'll talk to him a little bit about the Synod, I'm sure. We'll talk to him about the new writings from Pope Francis, but it's the Church in the News, so you can ask him whatever you want about the Church in the News to wrap up the week here. But before we get to that, we've got Rose Sweet here with us. Rose, of course, rosesweet.com is where you can go to find out about what she does. She's a life coach. She's an author. She's someone who helps people with divorce and annulment and all of that stuff. And we're just always super happy when Rose is here. Hello, Rose. Thanks for coming.
I'm super happy to be here, too. But I hear you're still getting over your Australian trip. And you said to me today, right now, if you fall asleep during the show, just take over.
Yeah, you need to take over if I fall asleep. Yes.
Okay, I will.
Check my pulse. Just see if they need CPR. But I think I don't know what. I cannot get my body back on the clock in America. I think my soul is like, you should just live in Australia. Go back to Australia. So, but I can't get on. I can't get on America time. I'm a mess, Rose.
I know, it's tough, isn't it?
Life is messy, Rose, and
It is.
sometimes that mess extends to marriage, and that's one of the things that you talk about. And sometimes we say, live as brother and sister in certain situations. Why does the church say that, and what does it mean by that?
Well, what a deep and lengthy answer that could be, but today we're going to give it our best shot.
Okay.
Okay, so marital intercourse, the marital act, belongs in marriage, and the couples, the spouses, have a right and obligation to be sexually available and loving toward each other. It does not belong in any other relationship. That has long been the teaching right out of the mouth of Jesus. It's just not some man-made rule.
I'm going to just stop you right there, because since about 1923, 100 years now, the world has completely rejected that message. Not completely, but broadly rejected that message. What's up?
I know, and every once in a while you'll see some celebrity who's been burned and crashed and burned so many times, and they will rediscover this truth of it, and they'll cry out in a public way and be silenced immediately. I've seen that over the years.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So sex belongs in marriage, and if your marriage failed and you got a civil divorce, the church still considers you validly married until proven otherwise with a competent tribunal in the annulment process. So to attempt marriage with another person, as much as you love them and feel like you're done with the other marriage, you commit adultery, maybe even a sense.
Who said that?
Well, Jesus.
Oh, yeah, so we're going by the teaching of Jesus.
Not man-made rule.
No,
not man-made rule.
This is what I think sometimes people get mad at us. But these are the words of Jesus.
These are some of the hard sayings,
Right.
like you have in your book. Jesus, teacher of strange things.
Yeah.
He said some very difficult things, but it was because he loves us and wants us to go higher. So if you have attempted remarriage civilly without an annulment, you are objectively and clearly in the state of adultery, and you are not to be exchanging sexual relations with somebody who's not your spouse.
Yeah.
That's the simple, short answer. But may I read something I brought today?
Please.
Very short. Okay, so here's a case of a man and woman. They were Catholic. He didn't really understand the teachings of the church, but she was on fire for living higher, and they had remarried, and they went to their bishop, and they decided to live as brother and sister.
Okay.
And she wrote a book about it, about their story, and it was very real and very honest. And here is the one line from that book. It is a difficult life we chose, yet both of us feel truly alive for the first time in years.
Wow.
The book was written in 1960, and it was featured in a Time magazine article about this is a worldwide, article about the Catholic Church's teachings on living as brother and sister. So
Right.
This is not new. This has caused problems for people for a long time.
But it's even from it leaving the lips of the Lord. I'm sure it is always connected to liberating people, like to make people live fully alive, not trapped in things that they should not be trapped in.
Right. Well, it's just like, it's like a little kid. If all they want to eat is Twinkies morning, Twinkies noon, Twinkies night. Okay, Twinkies are fine. Well, they're not as fine as we thought they were. But that's an inordinate attachment and focus on Twinkies. And we can do the same thing with sex and sexual release. We got to have it. No, we don't.
I know this is a shocking thing to say in the world today. I mean, I think a major culprit here is Sigmund Freud. But the whole kind of modern, therapeutic movement, at a certain point, it said it rejected the idea that you can have self-control and that self-control is actually a very human thing, a thing that humans are quite capable of, and it's good for human beings. They went the other direction.
Right. Well, and this is what children do. They go to their parents. Well, can't we just stay out later? Well, why do we got to do this? It doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, when you are not well-formed and you're not mature and you're not living a life of virtue, adult virtue, you can't see and think that way. And we have a lot of delayed adolescence in our culture. Sociologists have made that pretty clear. We have a lot of...
My wife has made that clear, too.
Well, in some cases it is true. I'm not going to name names or anything. But
she's made that clear.
Yeah. No, we all do that. I have a tendency every once in a while. I got that little girl inside of me, too, that, wants to pout and whine.
Yeah, right.
But I don't let her lead the bus, drive the bus.
Yeah, right. Okay, so if we let the Lord drive the bus, to extend your metaphor, then what do we get? What do we get if we let the Lord drive in this situation?
Well, living as brother and sister means that you live without having any appropriate sexual activity or expression, but you can still love each other and be affectionate. I mean, I lived with my brothers I had when I was in my 20s and they were trying to get out of the house. I said, come live with me. I thought I could get them to do all the chores, right? Wrong. But it was a delight we went grocery shopping, we did chores, we went on little weekend trips, we worked in the garden, we watched TV together, and we didn't have a sexual attraction for each other, and we didn't indulge that. But it was a good life, and we had a good friendship. So there are many marriages, if anybody listening out here, if you're honest, there are many marriages where sex has stopped a long time ago for a lot of different reasons, and you can still be happy and healthy and holy. So we have to get our perspective back.
Well, I think we have to say this too because the church has other vocations, and I know religious women who live completely fulfilled, beautiful lives. They're wonderful, charming, intelligent, brilliant women, but they don't need sex. You don't have to have that to have a fully, alive life.
Right. No, you don't.
To say nothing of the priests. But I just think we sometimes don't talk about women religious as much and the wonderful things they do. But this is a great tradition in the church, and it has produced wonders and miracles. And but people just don't believe it anymore. They don't believe you, Rose, when you say sex is not necessary for a fulfilled life.
Okay, let me qualify that, though.
Okay.
If there are people in marriages, who have relied on sex as the only way to express their love, their affection, their tenderness, or have some kind of intimacy, because they can't do that in conversation, or then they feel horrible that this is, how am I going to express love to this other person? Well, maybe this is a time to develop all those other beautiful ways of expressing love to the other person that are non-sexual. And I know every woman out there here, and I'm not blaming men because we women have our own issues, but we would love that. In fact, the church has always taught there should be an element, and this goes back to Scripture with Tobias and in the book of Tobit. There should be an element of brotherly, sisterly love in every marriage.
Of course, yes, right.
Right.
Yeah, and that's we can easily miss that as well.
Right.
So that and that may even lead to some of the divorce, because when the other fire goes out or isn't doing what it did before, you don't have other things that are
Right.
are uniting the spouses.
Right, you haven't developed it.
Yeah. So when did this whole idea of living as brother and sister come about, though?
Well, you can do a long study of this. We know in the Catholic Church we have some writings back as early as the 1700s, and the theologians at the time of St. Alphonsus Liguori really tackled this. And then, of course, in the 50s we have a lot of moral theologians address this again. They did again in the 60s. Of course, the last few popes, John Paul II and Benedict XVI, they had encyclicals that address this. It was called the Brother-Sister Solution. Beautiful writings, beautiful, but how does the average layperson ever read those or know about those? Right. So, and then Pope Francis, God bless him, he is bringing these triggering topics up for discussion, and I think that's good. And we shouldn't jump the gun to say that he's throwing everything out.
No, of course not.
But we do need to talk about it. But since we're all talking about it, let's talk about it like Jesus talked about it.
That's the key, isn't it? The number is 888-318-7884. There are situations in which the Catholic Church calls even those who are in marital situations to live as brother and sister. And we're talking about that today. If you've got a question about that, if you want to chime in, you're very welcome. Rose would love to talk with you. 888-318-7884 is the number. I got to take the break.
Okay, good.
We'll come back with more on this whole Catholic idea of living as brother and sister right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
I'm continually amazed and humbled at the way God can work through me to help so many people. Although I have no idea what the callers' questions will be that day, I trust that the Holy Spirit can use my education and experience to guide, challenge, or comfort those who call.
Mast Appeal with Colleen Kelly Mast. Saturday morning, 9 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Wildly popular Rose Sweet is our guest today on Catholic Answers Live. I know she's wildly popular because we always get notes and things telling us how great she is after she's been here. I don't know if that's family members or people she's paid, but we get a lot of those.
I like wildly. I like
wildly popular. Yeah, I think that you are wildly popular.
Wild Irish Rose.
Oh, look at that. That's you. The number, if you want to get in on the conversation, 888-318-7884. Sometimes we say this phrase and just kind of assume that people will know what we're talking about and what the origins of it are. We say to people, well, this is a situation where you need to live as brother and sister. We say this to couples sometimes. What does all that mean? What is all that about? That's what we're talking about with Rose. So, but let me just ask you this. Why would we do it?
Okay, so as a Catholic, to receive all the graces that God has for us and those personal, intimate encounters with Jesus Christ in the sacrament of confession and Holy Eucharist, no Catholic is allowed to approach our Lord in those sacraments with serious, unconfessed sin. We have to be sorry, know our sin, own it, be sorry for it, be willing to get rid of it, to be in reconciliation with Him. If you're in a second marriage and you don't have an annulment, you're in a situation of adultery. That's a serious sin. So the couple can go to their priest or go to their bishop or whatever and understand that we are not going to live as husband and wife. We will continue to live as brother and sister. And it's a little more complex than that. But you understand why you're doing it. You commit to each other. And then if you're also maybe in a position of causing any scandal, that has to be addressed as well. If people who know about it, it can get complex. But you do that so that you can return to the sacraments. So you can be in a state of grace and receive every single thing that Jesus has for you through the sacramental life.
So someone becomes convinced, or a couple becomes convinced that, hey, we do have these previous marriages or a previous marriage in our past. We do accept what the church teaches. Do you have any practical help for them in undertaking what is? I mean, it does seem to me would be an arduous road for many, many people. I don't think we're saying it's an easy road. We're just saying it's possible.
Well, let me ask you this: Is the Christian life an easy road?
I have not found it so thus far.
No.
But I'm not very good at it. I mean, but yeah, it's tough.
No, because we have disordered passions about a lot of things, and that's why we need a Savior, and we have one, and that's why we need grace, especially through the sacraments.
Yeah. Okay. So help us through this arduous task.
So, as in this brief time, you do not necessarily, if you're living together, one doesn't need to move out of the house and start a whole new set of financial, obligations. There are, situations maybe where you're still raising young children, or there's, lots of different things. You don't necessarily need to move out. Some people, though, if they're able to, and it's causing them a near occasion of sin, they might need to move out. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, no. But what you do is
it's very expensive to move out, and not everybody has that kind of resources.
And that's why a lot of people are moving in together and not getting married. It's money again. So we got sex, we got money, here we are.
Yeah. Sounds like Vegas.
It does.
Go ahead. Okay, sorry. I apologize. Go ahead.
That was actually pretty funny.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing you should do is move out of the bed.
Okay.
Move out of the bed.
Yeah.
And I would say move out of the bedroom.
Sure.
Move out of the bedroom.
Okay.
Just avoid. Look, if you're trying to lose 100 pounds and you got donuts on your mind all the time, don't go to the donut shop. So remove yourself from temptation.
I hate that example, but I get what you're saying.
I know, because I love donuts too.
Okay.
But move out of the bed and move out of the bedroom.
Okay.
And most people can reorder their homes to find a nice, cozy, safe, wonderful place for both people to sleep.
Yeah.
And if somebody tells me, we don't have room, and I'm going, let me come over, I'll find it for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually have been in this situation. So it is difficult, but when your heart has surrendered to the Lord and you want to please Him more than you want to please yourself, it gets easier. And your vision gets clearer.
Right. Yeah.
So,
that's important. You're not alone. This is not a thing. This is not an athletic event. There's the Lord there to help you, and all the saints and sacraments there to help you.
Well, right. And now that I'm saying this, move out of the bed, move out of the, get all this stuff. This is what single people should do anyway, who are dating or,
Ah, yes. Right.
Get out of the bed,
Right.
Get out of the bedroom, and get off. Don't be cuddling on the sofa late at night after a movie. It's just like it's an invitation,
Yeah, right. You're asking for trouble.
We
used to call this avoiding the near occasion of sin, but I don't think people even know what that means anymore.
We should bring that back because it's
in so many ways. Like there's a million ways you can avoid the near occasion of sin, and we act like that's some kind of old-fashioned language, but it's super helpful when you think of your life.
It's totally smart.
Yeah.
It's
like if I always gossip with this one person, well, you can avoid that. Be with
Right.
other people when you're with that person.
Right.
Don't be alone.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So-
you can still be friends with them.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. You don't have to cut everything off and live in a monastery kind of a
Right.
thing. Right. Okay. And appropriately, this is what I put, avoid alcohol. I'm not saying stop drinking alcohol, of course. But, if you're at a restaurant and you have a glass of wine or, a beer or a cocktail, whatever, but when you get home, don't continue drinking because it just makes it more difficult. So, this is self-control, self-mastery.
Right.
And it's not because it's bad and you're following a rigid rule of the church. It's you're choosing to live a higher way. You're choosing to live the fullness of being male and female.
Yes.
So that you can receive everything that God has for you.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Avoid sexy movies and books. What are you watching on TV? What are you watching on your computer? And especially avoid unsupportive friends. I remember when I was trying to be very chaste, I had a girlfriend who loves me dearly, but she has a different moral code than I do. And she sincerely and sweetly saying, you can have sex. Just go ahead. It's okay. God understands. You love each other. And those are seductive and tempting words.
Right.
And you can't be around those friends. You have to set very healthy boundaries with those and say, no, I cannot do that.
Again, 888-318-7884 is the number. Do you want to go to calls now?
Let's go to calls.
Okay. Wow. All right. Rose Sweet, ready to go to calls. Let's see. Well, I have to find the calls. They're here somewhere on my document. Let's start with Chris in Ohio, listening on 1060 AM. Chris, thank you very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. The question is, you're talking about annulments, and I'm in a family who was divorced. Parents had an annulment, and I think I've always struggled with that word because to me annulment means something never happened. And when there are children that have come from a marriage, I still, the hard time I have with that is, how can the church say we're going to annul something when children are here now?
Wonderful question.
What am I then in the eyes of the church?
Great, Chris.
Really, really good question. So the church does, in fact, say that nothing happened when it comes to a valid marriage bond. But that did not happen. But what did happen was they had social bonds and loving bonds and
legal bonds
and financial bonds, and they had these beautiful parental bonds. And the Catholic Church has always looked at every child as beautiful and wanted and intended by God. And, they're not illegitimate. They're not, anything bad or negative. The Church does say in this part of their relationship, there was no valid marriage bond, but there were other meaningful and beautiful bonds. And we're here for you to support you through that grievous time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I guess that was my question. Is I always felt like, does the church look at me as basically a bastard child?
No.
I don't exist.
No.
I've always struggled with that.
Well, it's a strange one because the church's defense of marriage is related to protecting children from these kinds of things. So she has to tell the truth about marriage, but legally, your parents were married.
Right. Your parents were and remember, being illegitimate is a civil term. So your parents were civilly married and have children. They're not bastards in that sense of the word. And you are precious and loved in the eyes of Mother Church, just as much as Cy Kellett.
And I appreciate that. No, and I'm a practicing Catholic. It's just,
Praise God.
Like I said, I've always struggled with that only because I just don't like the wording. You look up the word annulment, and it's basically something didn't exist. It didn't exist. And
right.
I think to myself, well, that just doesn't make sense. Maybe they should change wording. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Something didn't but let's not lose the fact that something did not exist from the very beginning, and that was the marriage bond, but not the people, not the children, not the other goods in the relationship.
If I could add, because if the marriage bond existed, the church, no one has any power to dissolve that, because Christ himself said, if that bond is there, I'm paraphrasing what he said, no one can put it asunder. So the declaration that lifelong bond was not there doesn't mean that all the rest of the stuff, even the legal marriage, wasn't there.
Right. Chris, God bless you.
Let's go to Tom in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Hi, Tom. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Thank you. Yeah, Rose, first I want to tell you, you do an extraordinary job.
Oh, she gets enough positive input, Tom. Come on.
Tom, keep going, Tom.
I think all right.
And furthermore, may God bless you, my dear, because you really have hit it right, the truth, the love, and everything. Well, anyway, here's my question.
Thank you, Tom.
In this archdiocese, it was always the practice, and I have no reason to think it's changed, that they will not even entertain annulment questions until the couple has received a civil divorce. Now, it seems to me that they've got things real backwards here. Before they do an annulment proceeding, it seems to me they ought to do some kind of counseling or whatever they can do to preserve the marriage. And then if it's clear that it's, can't do anything for it, well, then they, because you're good on to annulment. And I don't know how widespread this is in the United States, but when we have children involved and the extended family even and all that, what's your feeling about that? Should they have to get in a civil divorce before they'll start annulment? What do you think about that? What's your take on that?
Rose?
Well, Tom, thank you so much. It's never what I think, it's what the church teaches, and here's some clarification for you. The reason that they require the civil divorce to be final before they begin the annulment process in the tribunal is to allow the couple enough time and room and space to reconcile and to make sure there's no possible hope of that. So it's actually a loving thing to do for them. You can talk about it. You can talk about annulment and find out about it before you get a civil divorce. And that's what we encourage people to do, is find out, what is it? What can we do? What can't we do? Does that make sense?
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll ask Tom if it makes sense when we come back, because we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Rose Sweet on Catholic Answers Live.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Are you scared to talk about abortion? Don't worry, almost everyone is. You can overcome this fear, as Trent Horn shows in the newly revised and expanded second edition of Persuasive Pro-Life. With a little knowledge and a few proven techniques, you can become a bold and effective apologist for life. Visit shop.catholic.com to order your copy of Persuasive Pro-Life and never again be afraid to speak up. Also available at good Catholic bookstores. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Our guest is the beloved Rose Sweet. Tom is in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio, and was asking about why would a diocese require people to get a civil divorce before an annulment, and was also suggesting that people do counseling before this, or that the church encouraged counseling. So my understanding was you said that is what the church does. It does encourage people to do counseling.
Okay, but in this diocese or that diocese, you may not have people who will tell people, go read this book, or go to this class, or get counsel. They're processing the paperwork. That's their job, just like anything else. So you might not get the pastoral support that you need. In every diocese and every parish.
Okay, so you said to Tom, what do you think of that? And then I had to interrupt because we need to go to the break. Tom, what do you think of what Rose had to say?
Well, I'm still a little uneasy and puzzled. It would seem to me that if people come and say we want an annulment, instead of saying, well, go get a divorce first, they ought to say, go get counseling, or go try to save the marriage first. Then if it doesn't work, we proceed with the annulment.
They do say that. If anybody, usually in the average situation, if you would begin at your parish and you go to your pastor, we hate each other, we want an annulment, and that usually the parish will tell you. well, what's going on? Tell me your story. And they will, try to enter into and help you figure things out the right way. Nobody is saying, oh, you want an annulment? Go get divorced and then we'll take care of it for you. That's a myth.
Tom, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the call. All the lines full now, so on we go. Donald's in Pennsylvania listening on Ave Maria Radio. Donald, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Hi. Thank you for this interesting discussion.
Hi, Donald.
How are you? I appreciate what you said. I've heard this taught years ago. And also years ago, it seemed like this was all under the auspices of the current canon law. So I believe in 1917 there was one canon law, and then later on it was revised. And my impression is that according to current canon law, if a Catholic marries another Catholic and they don't get a dispensation from the bishop, that it's not a valid marriage. Is that so?
I think you meant to say if a Catholic marries a non-Catholic without a dispensation. And I agree, this is what the church teaches, it would make that marriage bond invalid. There would be no valid marriage bond.
And then they wouldn't need an annulment, though, then, right?
Well, no, they would.
Because they never had a bond.
Well, okay, but here's the other thing. The church presumes that anytime two people go, say I do and enter into a marriage, that there is a valid bond that is formed. We're given the benefit of the doubt until we find out there is reason that, support that there was not a valid bond. So even the people who just got married on the beach outside of, or I got married to a Protestant without a dispensation, I still have to go to the tribunal and fill out the paperwork and clear up publicly and privately the situation of my marriage, which is justice and, freeing us to move on. So it's not the long, complex form, but it's this short form. It's called a documentary form.
So they would go and fill this paper out and say, well, they didn't get the permission of the bishop.
Yeah.
And that would be
Yes.
kind of like it.
Yeah, it's very short, and you have to provide basic information and where you got married, and you have to show proof that you're Catholic and that you did not get the dispensation, and all those documents line up. Then the paperwork is issued.
And what happens if it's two Catholics do this? It's different.
If two Catholics,
they didn't get the bishop's permission and they got married on the beach or went to one of these places that have a justice of the peace.
Yes, all Catholics, even if one of them is Catholic, all Catholics are required to marry in the Catholic manner. And that means that they have a priest as a witness, because the priest doesn't really marry them. They exchange consent between themselves, right. But the priest witnesses on behalf of the church. And sometimes with permission, you could actually get married on the beach, but, hopefully people don't run out and start doing that.
Don't ask.
Yeah, but the basic thing is you get married in the Catholic manner. If two Catholics didn't know any better and ran off and got married in Vegas, they have to regularize that marriage. They just, the same thing, it's very easy. You go to the pastor, you start the discussion, and they will help you with that.
Donald, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the call and the questions. It's 888-318-7884. Rose Sweet is our guest. And as we often do with Rose, we're talking about marriage and what happens when Catholic marriages in particular run into difficulty. Or maybe sometimes people have remarried without a declaration of nullity for the first marriage. And so we've come to the topic of living as brother and sister today. If that's something that you'd like to talk with Rose about, 888-318-7884. Bob is in Houston, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Bob, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Well, thank you very much, Rose. This is an excellent topic.
Thank you, Bob.
This is excellent. What I want to say is that what you're suggesting is actually what a lot of couples therapists will suggest. And I'll give you an example. Suppose that a couple gets married and they have sex before marriage, and maybe quite a bit, Well, what that does is that is not conducive to making the emotional connection. They make a physical connection, but it's not conducive to making emotional connection, because what the Catholic Church suggests is conducive for not only the physical but the emotional connection. And so what will happen after 10, 15 years or so, the husband, all he's thinking about is the physical side of it, but the wife is much more aware of the importance of the emotional connection, and she just gets fed up. And so it causes great problems. And so if they go to a couples therapist, the couples therapist will say, okay, no, you need to make a contract that you're not going to have sex for a year. And some guys, of course, they think this is impossible and all this nonsense. But it's the same thing as if I want to learn how to speak French, the best thing for me to do is to just go live in France for a year, where that's all I can do,
Bob, I'm going to let Rose comment, because I appreciate the comments, but I want to get Rose in here. Thank you.
Well, for anybody listening, when the couple does have sex before marriage or having sex, there is also an emotional connection in the marital act. So it's not just physical. There is emotion for both of them, but it doesn't allow it to get to the depth. The sex, when you take away sex, if the couple can't get to emotional depth without it, then we have a problem. And I agree, there are a lot of therapists who will say, withdraw for a certain time, and even Scripture says this.
Really?
Yes, to withdraw for a certain time, but not indefinitely, for right reasons. If there's a situation that you're struggling with, if somebody is sick, you don't have to force sex upon them. The husband, when the wife is sick or she just had a baby and he goes, we're doing it tonight, whether you like it or not. No, even the Scripture even
he sounds like a lovely fellow.
Well, but here, there's nothing new under the sun in that sense. And thank God our church has always taught about that tenderness, that there will be times where you pull apart, but it is for a time and for a reason.
I got to tell you, I was talking with, and Donald, thank you very much for the call, but with some Catholic couples who are, they're like super Catholic, and every single couple had a time when they had to be apart, whether together, still in the house or even outside the house sometimes. Every single one of these couples, and we're all in our 50s, I guess, or coming up on 60, and there is, marriage has its ups and downs, but sometimes it has its, you need some reframing of the marriage by separating from sex, but also from other kinds of intimacy so that they can get healthy again.
Okay, let's talk turkey here. Every woman would be madly in love with a man if she knew that he could master himself for a higher cause and not make demands of her, and he would want to love her and protect her and be intimate with her emotionally before any of that. That increases trust, it increases appropriate bonding, and it deepens love. This is what every marriage should be based on.
I stopped listening after the word turkey, but what came up then? You just make me so hungry. Donuts and
Missy,
Twinkies
are you
and
out there listening, Missy?
She's probably not. If you want to talk turkey, she's probably not listening. Oh no, you're on. She might be listening.
Okay.
All right. You know what? Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more calls for Rose Sweet on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul, and that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come? At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Keep Christ and Christmas this year with holy reminders for those on your gift list. From seasonal ornaments and items for your home to a wide selection of gift-giving ideas. Let EWTN Religious Catalog inspire your Christmas shopping. Log on to our website or call toll-free at 1-800-854-6316. Buy Catholic. Shop today at EWTNRC.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Apparently, what we do here is callers call up. They tell Rose how great she is, and then they ask her question. I don't like
that.
it.
I'll be back tomorrow. Oh, it's Friday. It's Saturday.
Yeah, come back. Come by tomorrow. Yeah, we'd love to see you here, Rose. Andrea in Portland, Oregon, listening on the great Modern Day Radio. Andrea, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Rose. Did I mess up on Andrea?
I did. Hey.
Hi, Andrea.
Hey, guys.
Hi, Andrea.
Hey, sister. So, my children's father is in love, and they have a great life, and she's a great sister mom. Her son is a brother to my son, and I'm so grateful for that. And I feel like God blessed us for that. And when now I'm with mine, because my ex and I realized we were friends, definitely buddies, and we're co-raising these beautiful people whom God made for us. And now I'm with one partner whom we had a honeymoon phase and in love and all that, the sex, hey Donald, to the connection again. There's a place where you can play music for one another. You can dance, you can send a song, you can make food, you can do little deeds, you can make fun of one another and be brother and sister in that way without having to leave one another in your mind, without having to leave God, with remembering that Jesus is with you both, God is loving you both, and it doesn't require this grand gesture, that you can be friends.
Andrea, if I could just ask you, when you say grand gesture, are you referring to marriage or to sex?
I'm referring to trying too hard, I suppose.
Okay. Rose?
Andrea,
either way.
Honey, are you remarried civilly?
I am not remarried.
Oh, okay.
I have 4 children. Their dads were both altar boys. They don't like that, but
okay, so the man you're with now, you're in love, but you're not married, right?
We are not, but we pretty much, there comes a point where you think you are. There's days where it's friendship, and there's days where it's really, you're mine, you're my partner, you're my one, you're my buddy.
Okay, Andrea, there's a difference between a buddy and you're the one. So what I would strongly suggest is that you get some good Catholic counseling to help you sort through this relationship. It sounds like there's a lot of good, but also some problematic areas that you're struggling with. I hear it in your voice, and I've been there myself. Go get some good counseling, and please reach out to me if you need help afterward. Rose@rosesweet.com.
Rose@rosesweet.com. You're going to get a lot of emails now.
Okay.
But Andrea, thank you for the call. Let's go to Frank in Parksburg, West Virginia, listening on, we love West Virginia. It's our favorite state here. Listening on 105.3 FM. Frank, thanks very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Well, I told the screen it was more or less to make a suggestion.
Okay.
It'd be a program on reasons why a person stays celibate before marriage.
Oh, what a great suggestion!
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any? Do you have any that we should mention?
Well, I was celibate. I chose to be celibate. To me, a marriage, if it's just based on sex, it will not last. It will not last, and it won't be a good marriage.
Right.
Yep.
It's got to be based on, you care about them, you want happiness for them. And I lost my love of.
Did you lose somebody that you love? Frank? Your wife?
I lost the love of my life
Oh.
of 44 years.
Oh, Frank, I'm sorry.
God bless you. That's a.
She gave me 3 beautiful children.
Oh, praise God. You know, Frank, I got to tell you, I think the testimony that you're giving right now about marriage is exactly what people need to hear. That you were faithful before marriage and that strengthened your marriage, and you got 44 years together and 3 beautiful children, and she wasn't just your partner in the physical sense. She was your partner in life. And that's, to me, that's the image of marriage right there, Frank.
Our prayers are with you, Frank.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your...
God bless you.
Thank you for sharing, Frank. Just so helpful and beautiful. And we'll pray for both you and your spouse and all 3 of those children. Thank you, Frank. We don't have much time left. I'm going to keep going.
Okay.
Joanne in Rhode Island. Joanne, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Rose. No? Did I push the wrong button? Joanne?
Joanne?
You're gonna. All right, we're gonna come back to you, Joanne. I have a feeling she might be talking, but we're not getting a good connection. But don't worry, we're not gonna hang up. Well, I say that, but we're not gonna hang up on you on purpose. We'll check the line and see if we can get you on. Mary's in Texas. Mary, thank you very, very much for the call. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
Okay, thank you so much. My question is a bit of a reframing of a question asked by an earlier caller. He had asked about divorce prior to annulment, and he stated it didn't completely make sense. I am not sure that it does either, and my reason is if you approach a tribunal to request an annulment, they're going to make an investigation about whether the marriage is valid or not. And they might say, no, you may not have an annulment because your marriage is valid. And if they reach that decision, you shouldn't divorce because they've reached the decision your marriage is valid, and therefore you need to stick it out. So I think if you require divorce first, it kind of assumes that you're going to get the annulment, whereas if you're really open to a possible not getting the annulment, then you shouldn't require divorce first.
Okay, this is a great question. There's lots of layers to it. First of all, the tribunal is not staffed to assess marriages that are in trouble, and that's the role of a good therapist, counselor, or spiritual director. The tribunal is there to process according to the law the marriage case, and the burden is back on you to stay in the marriage, get help. When you've gotten the help, or you've made you've done everything that you can do, and it ends up in civil divorce, then you approach the tribunal. And let me clarify this too. The tribunal does not decide if you have a valid marriage or not. Your marriage is already presumed to be valid and with an unbreakable bond until you can prove otherwise to the tribunal. And that's why it's really important when a marriage does get to that point of brokenness and you believe that you have grounds for nullity, to get good, experienced, professional help to present your case to the tribunal.
Since it's presumed valid, then the presumption should be that you don't divorce until you can prove it's invalid.
Well, no. Well, hang on. Okay, let's put an example to that. You should not get divorced, and you should do everything to preserve the marriage, whether you think you have grounds for annulment or not. But there may be cases where, let's say your husband is violent or your wife is violent, and there's a threat of your health and safety and welfare. And the church teaches, and this is in the catechism, that you can file for civil divorce under certain rare circumstances and not be in the state of sin. But that marriage bond is still presumed to be there and valid, and you can't move on to another relationship. Does that make sense?
That part does. But if we follow that line of reasoning, then the annulment process would be restricted to people who have only abusive spouses, whereas there could be people without abuse who still have grounds for annulment.
Yes.
Yet they don't have the grounds for divorce, right? You see? So the people who
No,
are
no.
not divorced shouldn't to approach the
No,
tribunal.
hang on, because when you say civil divorce, they have a whole separate set of rules and regulations that permit a civil divorce. And some may line up with the Catholic Church, and most of the time it does not. Because right now we have no-fault divorce. So if you're in a difficult situation, A, you need to get help. B, you need to do everything you can. C, you need to learn what the church teaches about marriage and your options in a very difficult marriage. Maybe you can get a civil divorce, maybe you cannot. But the tribunal doesn't get involved in any of that reasoning or that pastoral work. It's the caboose. It's at the very end when all efforts have failed, and if at least one of the parties believes they have enough evidence to support nullity, then they approach the tribunal.
I hate to do this, but I'm going to leave it there because I do have other callers and I still have time to get them on with Rose. But thank you for the call.
It's a complex topic. And,
Sure.
I'm glad, Mary, I'm really glad that you brought this up because everybody should find out more about it.
Karen is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, listening on 1380 AM. Karen, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Rose.
My name is Karen. I was married in Baton Rouge at a full gospel church. My husband, I thought, was Baptist, and then after 4 years of marriage, I found out that he had been baptized Catholic. And I went to see a priest in South Carolina where my parents were living. He told me that because my husband had been married once before, we would not be able to get an annulment. So I came back to Baton Rouge 2 years later, and a very nice priest here had us fill out paperwork. We submitted it, and because my husband had been baptized and confirmed Catholic, it had made no difference at all what his first marriage was, and we were able to get our marriage blessed in the Catholic Church. And I attribute this to St. Augustus Tolton. My father was praying to him for 6 years, for 7 years.
Well, we're big fans of Father Tolton, and I'm glad you called him a saint. I don't think he's been declared a saint by the church, but that doesn't mean we
He's
can't
very saintly.
colloquially use that. We only have about a minute left, so I want Rose to respond. It does sound like part of what Karen is saying is you get different answers in different dioceses and parishes.
Okay, you do get different answers, and that's an ongoing struggle, and that's why we need a good thing like Catholic.com to find out the truth of what the church really teaches. But your husband's prior marriage needed to be cleared up. So I don't know all the conversations that went on, but apparently this other priest went ahead and cleared up that prior marriage and allowed you to convalidate or, bless, elevate your marriage to that of a sacrament if you're baptized. So sadly, when you go and you don't tell all the facts to somebody and they spend about 15 minutes with you, you might get the wrong answer. This is a really complex topic. It's like going to different lawyers who might take your case or not. So there is one truth that the church teaches about marriage, but not everybody who's involved in the process knows exactly what they're doing. We need to help change that.
Karen, I do have a second to come back to you. So did you want to reply to what Rose said?
I just wanted to thank you for letting me say something.
Well, if you want to come and praise Father Augustus Tolton, you can do that anytime on our air. So
Karen, your question is very valuable, and I'm sure it's helped a lot of people. So thank you for calling in.
What's Deacon Harold's book named? Deacon Harold Burke-Sivers. Get his book on Father Augustus Tolton, and I'm forgetting the name of the book, but the first African-American priest ordained in the United States, and a hero and a saintly man, and both of them, both Deacon Harold and Father Augustus Tolton. But Darren will get me the name of it. We started by talking about living as brother and sister.
And we ended up on annulment.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of life has a messiness to it, certainly in our relationships, and we got to be willing to. I mean, one thing I do think you are a model of, Rose, and I hope other people will model this too, is it's not just to dump shame on people. We all have made messes here and there in our life. The church loves you and wants you to be in a regular relationship with Jesus where you can get all the grace that the church has to give you.
And we are here to help.
Yes, and you are here to get compliments. Everybody, oh, Rose is so wonderful.
She is. I even love her.
All right, Matthew Bunson coming up. He's less wonderful, but he's awful good. So we'll have him right after this. We'll talk about the church in the news coming up on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. And if you want to know about the church in the news, there's just one place to go, and you all know where it is. It's Al Kresta, but we don't have Al Kresta here with us, so we'll do the best we can. And we've got a regular visitor to Al Kresta's show, Dr. Matthew Bunson, here with us. And Church in the News means if you've got a question about what you're hearing about the church, that's what Dr. Bunson does. He reports on and comments on and knows what's going on in all the various things happening in the church. So I'm sure we'll talk about the Synod on Synodality. We'll maybe talk about some of the writing from Pope Francis. But first, let me welcome Dr. Matthew Bunson, middle of the night in Rome. Thanks for being here with us.
Yes, which is why I'm not wearing a tie. It would be kind of ridiculous to wear one this early in the morning.
Yes. Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that you've excused yourself from the tie. Yeah, good for you. Well, I did hear you.
It really is.
It's good to be in Rome. Is that what you said?
No, it's really great to be with you.
Oh, I thought you said to be in Rome. Okay. Well, well, thank you. I'm glad to have you with us. But I heard you a little while ago talking with Al Kresta, and I have to apologize. I can't do an interview like Al Kresta does, but I'll do what I can.
No one can.
No, nobody can. That's true. Right. But my guess is the whole purpose for your being in Rome at this particular moment is that everybody else is in Rome at this particular moment. We got the Synod on Synodality sessions, which have they concluded or they're about to conclude for this year?
No, we have another full week.
Oh, you have another full week. Okay.
We do. Then everything will conclude on the 29th of October with the concluding Mass for this session. This first edition of the Synod on Synodality, which is officially the 16th Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops on the theme of the Synod of Synodality, and I won't ask anyone to try to repeat that.
Wow.
Started on the 4th of October and will conclude on the 29th, but let's remember this has been a 2-year process leading up to this, and then we have another full year ahead of us, concluding with the second session of this same Synod, again, 16th Ordinary, next October. So there's a lot of road ahead of us.
So I kind of know the stages. There was the kind of diocesan level, the national level. Now we've got, but I don't know what the next year is supposed to do. I assume we'll continue praying for the Synod, but there's nothing else I'm supposed to be doing, right? My job is over. They don't need me for anything.
No, I expect there's going to be more to come. You're absolutely right. This has been a 2-year process that Pope Francis, he first announced it really at the end of the Amazonian Synod in 2019. I know because I was actually here in Rome for that. And he announced that the theme going forward is going to be on synodality. Which really from about 2015 forward has been one of the keys to this pontificate, especially from his marking of the 50th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council's conclusion, where he had what I think is a hallmark, landmark speech on his vision for synodality. It started really in 2021 in the practical sense with, as you noted, a variety of phases. So we had the parish phase, was really a diocesan phase. Then that moved to the national phase, then the continental phase. Oh, yeah. And now we are here in Rome for this synod. But you're asking a really important question, and that is what lies ahead for the next year.
Right.
And we got a bit of a sign of it, and we can talk more about this going forward tonight. But we got a bit of a preview from the Relator General. I know that's a technical term. Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich of Luxembourg, who is tasked by Pope Francis to serve as the shepherd in a way. He guides this process. Usually a cardinal is appointed for individual synods, and he's the one who's been chosen for this. And he has spoken extensively on the process of synodality, but he gave a bit of a preview this last Wednesday on what might lie ahead for us.
And so the preview said, I guess that there's probably a ton of material that comes out of these weeks that will have to be reflected on, collated, organized into the what will be the beginnings of next year's work. But is all that work going to be done in Rome, or is?
Well, again, great questions.
You don't.
You're right.
Okay.
There's a lot of material that we've seen already, partly because of what is public. Now, there's been a lot of not secrecy, but confidentiality, and most of what's happened in this synod has taken place behind closed doors, with very few official statements. Two key elements that we've seen, however, are these general congregations, which are sort of the speeches to the participants in the synod hall, and then we have press briefings. Cardinal Hollerich used his speech the other day on Wednesday, launching the last of these phases of discussions here. And he talked about that when the synod participants go home to their diocese, remember this is cardinals, archbishops, bishops, lay people for the first time in real significance, men and women are religious. He said there are going to be two tasks. The first is to work to communicate the work here. And then the other is to really begin, and he used a couple of phrases of like paths of experimentation and deep study.
Okay.
We'll know more at the end of next week because the participants are going to be voting on what is called the synthesis document. Essentially, it's pulling together all of the discussions, not making any conclusions or recommendations yet, but basically pulling together all of the things that they've talked about. And they're certainly having controversial topics. That will then serve as the springboard for what we expect will be a series of marching orders, so to speak, or homework, not just for the participants, but for every Catholic and all the bishops around the world. So there's much yet to be discussed and much yet to be revealed. So right now, we don't have a lot of clarity.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. So there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot of people still to be listened to, all of that. But But in the end, will we get something that talks about broadly about the church and like a council does, church in the modern world, or will it be on how to live the church synodally, which is something that do you see what I'm saying? Because it's called the Synod on Synodality. So in the end, are we expecting something that will be about here's what synodality looks like going forward, or will we get something other than that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by in the end.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And what I mean by that is that this is the first phase.
Yeah.
So I think we can certainly anticipate a document. Now, let's remember that this summary document still has to be voted on by all of the members. And it has to pass by a 2/3 majority of all the members to be fully approved. So there is a possibility that if there is wide unhappiness in the Synod Hall and there are sufficient numbers, they could actually vote it down. Now, I suspect, as we've seen in previous synods, but this one admittedly is very different, usually they don't get to that point where that's a concern because they're able to reach a certain consensus. The difficulty this time, though, is that apparently, and this may change, they're not voting sort of point by point by point, which is traditional with synods. It's going to be a straight up and down vote on the document. So I suspect what will happen is the participants will be listening to this, especially from Friday, above all Saturday, where they're going to have everything read to them, and then there will be hours of discussion on what they've heard. Again, this is a summary pulling together everything that's been talked about. And they will be asked a simple question: does this summary accurately reflect the discussions that took place here? Now, that means that that will include likely the hot button issues of pastoral care for LGBTQ people, the question, the vexed question that we've seen raised here repeatedly this week about the female diaconate.
All right.
Some have even raised the specter of ordination of women to the priesthood, very controversial, even in the Synod Hall, and the structures in the church. The question will be not so much, I think, do you agree with these positions? Not that they're going to be advancing or making suggestions on this, but was this actually accurately discussed?
Yeah.
That's probably the way they'll reach some sort of a supermajority.
Now, I can hear that when you say that, but I can't imagine that the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or any secular, they're going to get that distinction. Because you could see someone like, I don't know, a cardinal from somewhere or something voting yes on the document, and that immediately being interpreted to interpret it as this cardinal or this bishop or whatever is approving of what's said in the document, but that's not what they're being asked. They're just being asked, does this reflect what was actually discussed?
Right. That seems to be where this is headed. Now, again, we have a week yet, and we don't know what this final document is going to look like.
Right.
We know, for example, there have been some changes made in the schedule of the synod just in the last few days in order to accommodate a greater opportunity for the participants to speak about what's in this proposed summary. So there's a lot yet to happen, and I think we may end up with editing along the way. But you're also absolutely right that we also have to prepare for the fact that many in secular media, and I would guess a lot of progressive Catholic media that's out there, will take any document that comes out of this and say, for example, Church Synod on Synodality approves further discussion of the ordination of women.
Yeah, right. When
Which
that's not
mean-
what
which isn't right, exactly. So there's going to be misinformation in exactly the same way. Two things have happened over the last several years. The first is there's a genuine and understandable misunderstanding or a lack of clarity as to what we mean by synodality.
Yeah.
And there has been, I think, some very deliberate misrepresentation in secular media and again in some corners of Catholic media as to what this synod is actually supposed to accomplish.
Well, let me, if I may, before I have to take the break, just to ask you about, I mean, you said progressive Catholic media, but it strikes me that this is also an opportunity for some of the more fevery things on the right side to accuse people of doing things that they didn't do do you see what I'm saying? By saying, well,
Yes,
you
I do.
voted to approve this document, and it's not going to mean that they voted to approve women's ordination, but that's how it might get portrayed in some of those places.
Yeah, I agree. And you're absolutely right that there are those who have high levels of anxiety about what's happening here in Rome, in Vatican City right now. And that was addressed and has been addressed repeatedly by the organizers of the Synod. I can think, for example, of Cardinal Mario Grech, who's the cardinal in charge of the Synod of Bishops itself, the entire organization, so to speak, was appointed by Pope Francis, saying on a number of occasions that the goal of this, and he's quoting Pope Francis, is not to change church teaching. But the challenge becomes when you allow the type of discussion that they've had in the Synod Hall, where issues like this are raised by some of the participants. There is this image out there, or this perception out there, that everything is up for grabs.
Yeah, right.
And that's a risk, I think, that as we have seen before, Pope Francis is willing to take in pursuit of his vision of synodality for the church. And we have seen it play out in other synods. I go back to the Amazonian Synod, where the final document actually proposed the viri probati, or ordaining seasoned men, married men, and raised also the question of potentially female deacons. That was handed to Pope Francis, and he did absolutely nothing with it. In fact, he rejected both notions, basically left behind the final report from the Synod on the Amazon, and wrote his own apostolic exhortation in exactly the way that he wanted. It's called Querida Amazonia.
Yeah.
And it was a much more a reflection of what he had done previously in Aparecida all the way back in 2007 for the evangelization of South America. So Francis knows what he wants, and we'll see what follows from that.
But he doesn't seem to have a fear of opening the box, let everybody have their... He doesn't seem to be controlling the process. Maybe because, I mean, maybe there's a certain self-confidence in that of, I'm still the Pope. I mean, I do get the final word on this. But also maybe some confidence that the Holy Spirit will, doesn't need that kind of control, can still, and maybe even better, accomplish tasks if you just let everybody have their say and then move forward after that.
That's been the hallmark of these synods under Pope Francis in particular, that he likes a free flow of discussion and a free flow of ideas. And some people find it very worrisome. Francis trusts, and at the end of the day, as we have seen consistently, Francis, as Pope, as is his right, has the final word.
Yeah.
Bishop Daniel Flores of Brownsville, Texas, is here. He's very well-known theologian in his own right. He's a brilliant Thomist. He's also the president of the Episcopal Conference here, USCCB's Doctrine Committee, and part of the small committee that's been formulating a lot of the work here for the Synod on Synodality. At a press conference that I attended just yesterday, he talked about the fact that when he was asked, because there are these anxieties about all of this, that he said all he has heard in the Synod Hall is faithful Catholics talking to each other. But then he added the important qualifier, sub tutela Petri, in other words, under the care of Peter.
Oh.
And he stressed that from that sense, he is not personally worried that somehow the hierarchical structure of the church is in danger from these discussions.
Well, he's not listening to enough podcasts then. Clearly, he needs to listen to some.
Or visiting enough sites. Yeah,
yeah, right. He needs to visit more websites. All right. Dr. Matthew Bunson is our guest. We're talking about the Synod right now, but we don't have to stay on the Synod. If there's other news that you'd like to talk about, the church in the news, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Right back with more Dr. Matthew Bunson on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Human beings are God's greatest masterpiece. Every person is made in the image and likeness of God. But every saint, that is, every person who accepts God's invitation, his upward call to make them holy. And so every story presents us with a unique masterpiece that God is writing.
The Journey Home, Monday night, 8 Eastern, on EWTN Radio and television.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Dr. Matthew Bunson is our guest. He's over in Rome, participating in all the conversations going on over there and the reporting going on over there regarding the Synod on Synodality. If you have questions in that regard, you're very welcome to call 888-318-7884. But if you want to talk about any other aspect of the church in the news, you're very welcome to do that as well. 888-318-7884. All right, I'm trying to, I honestly, I do think a lot of people are struggling with the word synodality, because what seems to be being proposed is that the church should be a more synodal church, to which I say, fine, what is that? I don't know what a more synodal church is. And maybe that's where the Pope is going to get us to in his final document, is explaining this is what, maybe he doesn't, maybe he wants, it's another one of those kind of the Francis technique of let it all fly out and then clarification will come after. But what is a synodal church? In what way is it different than the church we've got now? Oh, we got
right. There's been.
Oh, sorry. We had you on mute there for a second. So go ahead if you'll start again. Sorry, our fault.
Yeah, no, you're asking what I think is a really important question. And that is that from the start, there's been a challenge to define exactly what synodality is. And we go back to, like I was mentioning in the start of our conversation, in 2015, Pope Francis marked the 50th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council by really delving into his vision for synodality for the church. And his perception of it, his vision of it, is from synhodos, as has been explicated quite a few times over the last years, of journeying together. Mm-hmm. Now we can get into the whole history of synods. They have certainly evolved very differently in the Western tradition than they have in the Eastern, where synods have a much more deliberative and legislative authority than they do and ever have in the West. In the West, we still have them. We think, for example, of the Synod of Whitby, and I think it's 664, that decisively moved the Church in England into the orbit of Rome and really changed the Church in England forever in a very good way. We have the Council of Trent that mandated that dioceses have the diocesan synod and called for regional and provincial synods. So we can see that synods are a part of the tradition even of the West. Now, the institution that we most think of synods is the Synod of Bishops that was established in 1965 by Pope St. Paul VI, coming out. He did it really at the very end of the Second Vatican Council. And the goal was to keep some of the elements of the council going forward. From the very beginning, the Synod of Bishops has been a consultative advisory body. It has, by tradition and by, you can see, read it in Code of Canon Law, no authority. It is purely something that gives to the Pope its advice. Now, you have different types of synods, obviously, the ordinary, extraordinary, and special. But at the end of the day, they are a consultative body, and that's a point that's been made repeatedly here. So looking at all of that then, what exactly do we mean by synodality? And Pope Francis has said it is, as he put it, a style. It is the people of God journeying together, listening and accompanying. And I can vouch for the fact that having talked to many of the participants who've taken part here and read many of the documents and everything else and been at all the briefings, there's a lot of listening going on. So they are listening to each other. But we still have to understand the relationship between synodality and the church. And that, I think, is where many of the anxieties are emerging.
Well, yeah, because we have this, we have a magisterium, which can't, yes. It's not a magisterium of just listening to people. It's a, right. Not that, you can't have a normal human life without listening to other people. So I'm not denigrating that idea, but how does magisterium and synodality fit together? And maybe right. That's just a question that the synod has to answer, and we'll find out. I don't know.
Well, as you can imagine, that question, especially this week. So each of the weeks of the synod have been taken up with different aspects of synodality and the life of the church. Last week, we had a number of controversial issues. We had the discussions in the synod hall of LGBTQ, the question of the role of women in the life of the church. This week, which personally I consider to be the most important, not that these others aren't, but when we talk about synodality and when we talk about is dealing, where I think many people are asking the question, okay, what is this relationship? Is synodality replacing authority? Is it unraveling authority? Is it decentralizing authority? If you'll allow me to quote something that was said at a press conference the other day by Archbishop Dabula Mpako of Pretoria, South Africa. He said that synodality must coexist with the hierarchical structure of the church. And he says, I don't think that is under any question. And he said, however, what we are probably wanting to see is how the two can work in such a way that synodality begins to infuse the way the hierarchical structure of the church operates. And that was something that was echoed by Cardinal Michael Czerny, who's the prefect for the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, who's had a pretty significant role in formulating the synod itself, because his concern is so expansive. And he said the same thing, that synodality is the goal is to inform and to help the church, right. I'm paraphrasing here, to be better as a church. So it's not a question of destroying hierarchy or replacing hierarchy or authority, but to help inform it. But again, that it's a hazy concept, and I understand why there's a lot of concern out there.
Well, would that be like here's where my struggle is. If it's synod on synodality, why the discussion of LGBTQ issues? Because that seems like that could be a synod of its own. Is it because we're asking how can we better listen to marginalized right. community? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the stated goal.
I got you. Okay.
Now the question becomes, at what point do you stop listening and actually teach?
Oh, well, yeah, right.
A great question was asked by one of the participants, the Archbishop of Riga, Archbishop Stankiewicz, and he was asked pointedly about the LGBTQ question, and his answer was classical in a great way, restating the teachings of the Church. The Catechism, of course, is very clear on this, and the treatment of homosexual persons, but at the same time being very clear in the Church's teachings. And as he said, if you do not love properly, you're not loving at all. And part of loving is teaching.
Dr. Matthew Bunson, our guest, right back with more on Catholic Answers Live.
Why We're Catholic is the one book you can hand to anyone to invite them into or back to the Catholic faith. With more than 400,000 copies sold, Trent Horn's book has had a #1 ranking on Amazon.com for 5 years running. Now available in softcover, bulk cases, ebook, and on Audible. Find out what the excitement is all about. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic at shop.catholic.com or visit whywearecatholic.com.
Is relativism dead? It sure seems dead. Each day, new moral demands are made, and they are presented to us as absolutes. Everything, from transgender ideology to physician-assisted suicide, is presented as a moral good that all right-thinking people must accept. But Catholic Answers' own Carlo Broussard says look deeper, and you will see today's moralism is just relativism dressed up in new clothes. Carlo's eye-opening book, The New Relativism, shines a light on how the sacred moral teachings of this age cover up a deep denial of moral truth. Order your copy of The New Relativism today at shop.catholic.com and be prepared to defend the truth against aggressive relativism. The New Relativism at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Our Lord needs articulate defenders of the truth to spread the joy of the Catholic faith. Catholic Answers monthly giving club, Society 315, helps you fulfill the call in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be prepared to make a defense for the hope that is in you. For as little as $10 a month, you'll help Catholics grow in faith, bring lapsed Catholics home, and lead non-Catholics to the truth. Go to casociety315.com and join today.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It is turning out, I guess just because I'm really interested to hear what's going on in the Synod. It's hard to get clear news about the Synod because it's always right-wing and left-wing, and I know that that's not, I mean, there are right-wing people there, I'm sure, and left-wing people there, but that lens is so tired that I'm really glad to have this opportunity to talk with you about it, because I just don't feel like there's clear talk in many places. Now, having said that, I want to ask you a completely crass question before we go on to the callers. And I realize that this is a crass question. But we hear about all these new cardinals, and the problem is that they don't all know each other. The Pope is coming up on 90. I think he's 86 or 87.
He'll be 87 in actually some weeks.
Does a meeting like this start conversations in Rome about, hey, look at that guy, he might be the next one? And I realize that's a crass question, but I want to look behind the scenes at what goes on there.
That's a question that's actually been asked by quite a few analysts, what they call Vaticanista. So those are people who are sort of professional observers of the Vatican.
Yeah.
There's, I think, several pieces, for example, at Aci Stampa, which is one of EWTN News's agencies, digital agencies. It's based here in Italy. And it's a question that's been asked in several other publications. Are these gatherings, or gatherings like this, an opportunity for some of the cardinals who are here to get to know each other? The answer is certainly yes. Pope Francis has not brought together the whole college very often. He did it, I think, in 2014, and then he did it again last year in August for the consistory that took place then. He brought the cardinals together for about 3 days. Now, one of the criticisms at the time that was reported about the Cardinals was that they really didn't have much of an opportunity to spend time with each other. When they were basically being lectured about synodality. So part of the challenge that they're going to have, and now the numbers have increased again by another 18 electors, is that you're absolutely right. They don't know each other very well. And so in the event of a conclave, there will inevitably be one. We don't know when. We have no idea when. In fact, Pope Francis's health seems to be doing quite well at the moment. When they do meet, how are they going to get to know each other better? Well, within the conclave process, there are what are called general congregations in which all of the cardinals meet. They get to know each other. And then we'll have the lower key meetings where they just gather in casual settings of meals and elsewhere, and then reach a consensus. It's been similar in many ways throughout the history of the church, where cardinals are fairly far-flung and only come together for a conclave. So you can imagine, for example, conclaves in the late 19th century, especially into the 20th century, where they began having international cardinals. That it took you weeks on a ship to get to Italy. And famously, there was the old belief, and it probably was proven true, that because they didn't really trust necessarily like the American cardinals, because we were considered such a young church, that they would start the conclave at the earliest possible date. Make it much more difficult for the cardinals to arrive.
That doesn't bother me. If I don't. The other cardinals could do fine without the American cardinals, but
there's a famous story of some cardinals who arrived at, I think it was Civitavecchia or Ostia, and hired horses and galloped their way to the Vatican.
I hope we get that again. But I was thinking, Dr. Bunson, more in the popular mind. Are there figures who are kind of rising to the consciousness of the church in Rome and of the international church? They're going, hey, look at that guy has made some interesting interventions here. Maybe he's
this setting it's certainly not bringing together the entire College of Cardinals. There's a large body of cardinals here, in part because some of them are in charge of it. Some of them, for example, Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, was chosen by his peer bishops at the USCCB to represent the body as a whole. But there are a number of American cardinals who aren't taking part. All of Francis's choices for the U.S. As cardinals are in attendance. But it is correct to say, however, that there is a large gathering of cardinals here. And certainly this is an opportunity for them to be heard, to take part. We've had a couple of cardinals participate in the press briefings, Cardinal Czerny being quite prominent among them. We also have some of the newer cardinals who are taking part. I think especially Cardinal Fernandez, Victor Manuel Fernandez, who's the new prefect for the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, who was just appointed by Pope Francis, and of course is already weighing in a number of controversial areas. I don't know if you've covered the dubia over the last couple of weeks.
Probably more than we should have.
Probably, I can imagine.
I don't know. It's hard to know.
Exactly. So he's certainly somebody who is not averse to talking and to getting into the scrum of ecclesiastical battles. So he has one of the higher profiles right now. And then there are a few others taking part in this gathering here, I think, who are seeing this, not in a crass political sense of raising their profile, but I think who see this as an opportunity to be heard.
I'm going to get some callers on here with you. Let's start with Walt in Westchester, Pennsylvania, listening on the EWTN app. Walt, thank you for your call. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Matthew Bunson.
So I'm sorry, it sounds like you guys are kind of like running interference for what's going on at that place. I mean, the Pope has surrounded himself with some pretty dubious people like Francis. I mean, James Martin and Sister Janine Gramick, Whoopi Goldberg, Paglia, who's the head of the Pontifical Academy for Life, seems to indicate that he thinks contraception is acceptable in circumstances. This is not good for for the church. And then this so-called LGBT, which I don't think we should ever use those acronyms, that's given them kind of that attitude is acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have to agree on one thing. I don't think Whoopi Goldberg should have anything to do with the synod. But other than that, I will leave it up to Dr. Bunson.
Yes.
I haven't even heard about that, but I don't want it, whatever it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, happily, Whoopi Goldberg is not a voting member of the Synod of Bishops this time around. No, and I'm not making light in any way of the concerns of the caller. There is a lot of concern on the part of a lot of Catholics about what's happening here and about some of the events throughout this pontificate. The presence of James Martin, I know some people find to be very controversial because of his positions and because of the very high profile he has as an advocate for, forgive me for using the acronym, sir, LGBTQ. And we can also add that Sister Janine Gramick is also not an actual participant in the synod. I think we need to make that distinction because she's not an actual member here. She did meet with Pope Francis this week, source of controversy. But it's emblematic, I think, of Pope Francis's outreach and, again, his vision for synodality and that listening to everybody. Now, that brings, as I think you and I, Si, have been talking tonight, a lot of risk with it and a lot of anxiety to a lot of people. And I think those are playing out, interestingly enough, in the Synod Hall itself. That there is this discussion of the tensions that exist. Now, the way this Synod has been structured, there does not seem to be a great deal of vociferous disagreement among people. But there is certainly discussion, and we know it's been confirmed at the press conferences that issues like the ordination of women, either to the diaconate or to the priesthood, that's been raised. And it's also important to note that there have been interventions from a number of people, including one from one of the women participants. There are 54 voting women here who expressed serious disagreement with those who are advocating this position, saying that this is a niche subject, basically, and that it is not helpful, nor what women in the church need or want. And from that standpoint, I think those voices are also being heard. And again, it's Francis's choice to let everyone be heard. At the end of the day, we keep receiving these assurances, and that's not running cover for the Synod. It's a simple statement of what the organizers of the Synod themselves have said, that the goal here is not to change church teaching. And that's what Francis has said too. But clearly, when you have voices like this being heard, it does raise concerns on the part of a lot of people.
But I would go back, Walt, to what Dr. Bunson said earlier about this, the Synod on the Amazon, where the very similar anxieties were raised for very similar reasons. And what came out of that was not in any way really radical.
That's right. And we could see it. We go again to Carita Amazonia. Now, if we go to the Synod on the Family, there were two of them, one in 2014 and one in 2015. The results of that were Pope Francis's exhortation Amoris Laetitia in 2016. That itself has been the source of a lot of controversy, in particular Chapter 8, and then with several footnotes have been much discussed and have actually elicited, and sorry for using the word again, dubia that were sent to Rome.
Right, I forgot that. Yeah.
For clarification,
right.
We had the unanswered dubia at the time. Now we have responses to two sets of dubia, one from the 5 different cardinals related to some of the issues that the Synod is grappling with right now, and then another set that were sent from the Czech bishops under the aegis of Cardinal Dominik Duka, the Archbishop Emeritus of Prague, that also elicited a response. That itself, that responsum, to use the technical term, has itself then caused more controversy. The responsum was drafted by Cardinal Fernandez, and actually drew a response from one of the former prefects, one of his predecessors, Cardinal Gerhard Müller.
Yeah.
Raising a lot of concerns about the question of communion for the divorced and remarried Catholics who do not have an annulment, but who in some cases are forming their own consciences based on what they believe is the interpretation of Amoris Laetitia.
Walt, thank you very much for the call. We do have other calls, but I got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. But by the way, if you call now, we could probably get you on with Dr. Bunson. Whatever your question is about the church and the news, it's welcome. 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives.
The year was 1981. The FCC license to operate a satellite Earth station, the first ever given to an order of nuns, was granted to Our Lady of the Angels Monastery. Mother Angelica flips the switch and EWTN begins transmitting from Irondale, Alabama.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I just got overwhelmed with curiosity about what Dr. Bunson is experiencing in Rome during this time of the Synod, so I didn't go to any other news. But I'm going to be honest, I don't regret it. I'm learning a lot because it's really hard to get clarity on exactly what's happening. And okay, so what I mean, the general sense I'm getting is there is tension in Rome. There is tension within the Synod. But the people in the Synod, they're getting their say. They're being allowed to make the interventions in the language of the Church that they want to make, and that we're in a position now where we really don't know what's going to come from all of this. It's still quite a bit up in the air. Am I kind of summarizing correctly your take on it?
Yeah, I think you are. As we were mentioning in the start of our conversation tonight, that there will be a summary document that will be presented to them next week. Now, there's a certain opacity that has surrounded the process of its drafting, but the opacity will end come, I think, late Friday or into Saturday, when all the members of the Synod, all the participants, get this. It'll be read to them over at the course of some hours. It's not supposed to be especially long, but it's supposed to be, again, a summary document of all of these discussions. It's important to harp on the fact that this is the first phase of a two-phase synod that will conclude next year. That's important because we have, as we've been talking, months and months ahead of us. And I think that's where we're going to start to see with some clarity what exactly they mean by the implementation of synodality and what its impact, good or bad, is going to be on the structures in the Church. We've had the discussions theologically with that there's some danger to the structure of the Church or the hierarchy of the Church. That doesn't necessarily mean, however, that there is no grounds for concern on the part of a lot of people that some of these voices are calling for things that the Church cannot change. I think, for example, the ordination of women to the priesthood, that is simply not, the Church is not empowered to do so. And in exactly the same way that it's the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith stipulated in 2021, that the Church is not empowered to bless same-sex unions. Now, when we get into the technical details, for example, of the responsum from Cardinal Fernandez under the signature of Pope Francis and their response to the 5 cardinals, the question relating to same-sex unions and everything else, it was pretty clear that Pope Francis also holds that basic position, that we can't do this. Now, is it possible to provide some kind of a blessing? Well, that's one of the questions I think that came out of this. But I think there's also an interesting, I want to go back to, I mentioned a little while ago, Archbishop Stankiewicz of Riga in Latvia. And he had, when asked about the LGBTQ question and same-sex blessings and everything else, I want to quote this because I thought it was beautifully said. He said, "We welcome with love and respect, but true love cannot be separated from truth, because if love is separated from truth, it is no longer love." And he said, if there is a person living in sin and we tell this person, everything is all right with you, it's okay, go ahead, we do harm, he said, because this person is in danger. When he dies, he will be in great danger. That's the type of teaching that many of the participants are advocating here. And I think that's important to state, that has been a perception in some corners, some of those podcasts you mentioned perhaps, that somehow they have stacked the deck here. And I think we have to be careful about making too many assumptions in exactly the same way. To go back to your question about the College of Cardinals, there's an assumption that somehow all the cardinals who've been appointed by Pope Francis are sort of progressives. I hate to use the term because it sounds very political, liberal, progressive, however you want to do that. But somehow that all of the cardinals that have been appointed by Pope Francis are eager to change the teachings of the church. I know from personal experience, because I know quite a number of them, that's simply not the case.
Yeah, I wonder if it even seems the case with Francis. It strikes me that a better way to describe him than to say he wants to change the teachings of the church is he does seem to want to change the way of being church. That he feels like that can be with that. So I think sometimes we put it on him as if, well, he clearly wants to change this or that teaching.
Right.
But what he's making clear is he wants to change the way we're doing it.
Yeah, and that's something that's been reiterated by a number of the cardinals and archbishops who've been at these press briefings over the last weeks, that it's not a question of changing the teachings of the church, but in some ways it's how we teach the teachings of the church, how we evangelize.
Yeah.
And one of the goals, stated goals at least, of the Synod is to help the way that we evangelize. Again, I understand that it is alarming to have people apparently standing up and openly advocating for the ordination of women to the priesthood. Pope Francis himself has said that it is not the intention of the Synod to change church teaching. And we take Pope Francis at his word, especially because we have seen over the last decade that isn't something he's done.
Yeah.
And he's willing to take the risk of having everyone heard, as we've been saying tonight. But at the same time, he very clearly is able and has reiterated church teaching. In relation, for example, to the question of the ordination of women, he has said very publicly on planes and everywhere else that, as he put it, that is a closed door.
Yeah.
And he has specifically referenced Ordinatio Sacerdotales and a lot of other documents and other teachings about the ordination of women. He's defended it even in, I think it was the Disney documentary where he met with some young people and talked about that. There are those who have claimed erroneously that Pope Francis is somehow demoted or is not interested in the topic of abortion, yet he has used some of the most vivid images. He talks about hiring a hitman, for example. So Francis's style is something. And I go back to that phrase that he used for synodality, where he describes it as a style for the church.
I want to get a caller on with you. Steve is in Napomo, California, watching on YouTube. Steve, go ahead with your question for Dr. Matthew Bunson.
Yeah, first, thank you, Si, for your book, Teacher of Strange Things. I haven't thanked you. My question for you, Doctor. Go ahead, Si.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. That was very nice of you. Go ahead.
No, thank you, guys. Dr. Bunson, are you aware of the Jerome Biblical Commentary for the 21st Century? Pope Francis is forward and an imprimatur?
Yeah, Well, I've heard of it. I have not actually seen the book myself, so I can't really comment on what they mean by giving it an imprimatur. We don't actually see, unfortunately, a lot of books these days with the nihil obstat imprimatur in them. I wish we had more censors laborum.
But did you have a problem with the Bible, Steve, or with the commentary?
No, it's Romans 1:27. It says don't use to denigrate homosexual acts, and Romans 1:27, and I
Does it
don't
say,
understand that.
It says homosexual acts?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
You don't use Romans 1:27 to denigrate homosexual acts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, I can't really comment at this point because I have not seen it myself. I've read a few accounts about it, but I try to reserve judgment about these things until I actually have a chance to investigate and read it for myself.
Thanks, Steve. That's the best we'll have to do. Darren, let's not have Dr. Bunson on until he's read everything, okay? I don't know, why do we have him on if he hasn't read everything?
Well, it'll be a long time then.
I am very grateful for you staying up in the middle of the night there in Rome. I just want to get a sense of the feeling in Rome. You've been there many times. Does it feel different when this is going on? Does it feel like the city itself feel different?
Well, one of the beauties of Rome is that because it is so old, they have seen many an interesting event.
Yeah, right.
Including from the fall of the sack of Rome in 410 and 455, and then in 1527. So I don't think that there's a feeling at this point that Rome is about to be sacked. But I will say that one of the most interesting things coming now, this is my third trip in just a couple of months, is how vigorous and active the pilgrims are here. And it's maybe a hopeful way to finish up our conversation tonight.
Yeah.
But the lines, for example, at the Vatican Museum, the lines to get into St. Peter's are immense. And I think there's a real happiness on the part of the Romans from those I've talked to, that the pilgrims are back post-COVID. And this is a city and a country that were especially hard hit by COVID. Many businesses and restaurants that I'm familiar with over the years did not survive COVID. And so the pilgrims being back, but also I think says something about the desire, especially post-COVID, for people to make these spiritual journeys, these pilgrimages to Rome. And I think it's a heartening thing that what's happening in the Synod Hall is one thing. It's certainly going to have a great impact on the life of the church in years to come. But at the same time, outside of the hall, we have crises in the world, but we still have people who want to come to Rome as an act of faith and to see St. Peter's, and that's a remarkable thing.
I'm so glad that you made that point, because in a certain sense, those pilgrims are a metaphor for the whole church, and she has many people who are on that pilgrimage with sincerity and with integrity. And these crises, they come and go. These the upsets come and go. Probably the podcasters don't come and go. I think they're permanent now. But but I'm glad that you. I am grateful that you end on that note of hope, because people get worried, upset, and there are reasons to be worried, upset sometimes. But the pilgrimage continues. We're all on this on the way to the house of the Father, and
we are. And as a last line, Archbishop Anthony Fisher of Sydney made the great observation that if a synod proposal is at odds with the gospel, that's not of the Holy Spirit.
Oh, praise God for him. We were just in Sydney, and we weren't in Sydney. We were in Perth. We missed him.
He's a fantastic archbishop.
Yes. He is a fantastic archbishop. And you are a fantastic guest, Dr. Matthew Bunson. Thank you so much for staying up to the middle of the night, eating your pasta late to be with us.
A privilege to be with you, really is.
We'll see you next time, God willing, right here. Catholic Answers Live.